Welcome back to the second series of Coppers and Brass. In the next 6 programmes we're going to be looking at a wide range of issues in Irish traditional music. The first programme this evening we're going to look at the legacy of Seán O'Riada, and I'm delighted to have in the studio with me Síle Denvir. Síle, you're very welcome.
Thanks very much, Tommy.
We'll be coming back to you in a second to explore some of the great contributions that O'Riada has made and some of the legacies and maybe some of the myths. But in the meantime, let's have a look at this short overview of O'Riada's music.
Trying to assess O'Riada is very difficult, I think, because I don't think we understand enough of what he did yet. I often say to students, he was somebody who was opening doors. I don't know that O'Riada himself was fully aware of all the doors he was opening, but certainly he was making connections, and I think those connections go on to do things beyond what O'Riada did. And without him, perhaps we wouldn't have the music and the music scene and the sense of community wouldn't have evolved in the same way. I think he came around at a very particular point in the history of Irish music. I mean, in the 50s, you have cultus starting, you have the activity in the radio, and O'Riada's part of this energy as well.
I recall one occasion we were playing at the Gaiety Theatre, and the Castlehealy band were playing on the first half, and Cobblestone were playing on the second half. And 3 of the members of the Castlehealy band were also playing Cobblestone. But O'Riada had much more of an impact, and he captivated the media mainly due to his arrangement of Miss Earlier, which is brilliant. And that electrified people, and he attracted people who wouldn't have been otherwise interested in their music.
I think he was very important because he brought in different instruments, and in terms of tunes and things, it was also good because sometimes with traditional Irish music, if you go to a session and you're not from the area and you go there and you go in, it can be very intimidating if you don't know any of the tunes. But if you start playing O'Riada tunes and stuff like that, that everybody's heard them, everybody can be together, and it involves a lot more people and it's more enjoyable that way. And it can make it less scary and daunting going in and not knowing anyone.
That's like Seán O'Riada, he would have got tunes from the harping tradition, so Turlough O'Carolan, and if you go into a session anywhere, they're bound to know Turlough O'Carolan.
They know something, even if they don't know the name of it, they know something.
Yeah. So we've a lot to thank Seán O'Riada for that.
What's interesting about O'Riada is he is one man, okay, and he's controversial in some ways.
He came up with the notion of mixing classical and Irish music together because that wouldn't have been done ever. They would keep the two separate. Nobody would have put them together because it was as if it was like something the devil would do.
O'Riada is nearly the backwards model for what happens for a lot of musicians. I think an awful lot of people recognise Misha Éire in 1959 as kind of a seminal moment where O'Riada takes tunes from the tradition and from the song tradition and arranges them for orchestra, brings them out to mass appeal. And I know I've read somewhere where he was disappointed that people thought he composed the air when in fact it was Roisin Dubh, and that idea that people should know about the tradition.
The classical influence, I think, led to a lot of development with other players who aren't traditional musicians, strictly speaking. The likes of myself and Siobhan here, who would have been in a background of rock and funk and jazz and the likes of that. It led to kind of people experimenting in different ways, and we got bands like Planksty and Moving Hearts and Bioga and the likes of them. So I think, and Sweeney's Men. Yeah. And it just led to a whole lot of development where we have Irish traditional music as this huge worldwide phenomenon, especially when Riverdance came out. I mean, Riverdance really changed a lot of stuff, and they added all these different styles of music. I think O'Riada kind of was the first one to really kick that off properly.
Well, he gave it a different voice and a different platform, and you know, the media were founding him. A person was able to. He was well capable of interacting with them on all levels, and he was a very attractive man in so many ways. And you know, he brought that dimension. He was a very confident person, but it wasn't universally liked by everyone. I recall some of the old guys in the club, they didn't understand him starting and stopping and people doing solos, whereas they would play a tune from start to finish. And similarly down in County Clare, where they danced, if you stopped, you think there was something wrong, and one fella to play a fiddle solo and come back into the group. So that wasn't part of their tradition, but some of the people were just completely utilitarian. They played for dancing, and that was it.
He's also sensing there's something missing, and I think meeting people perhaps like John Kelly and hearing what John Kelly can do with the fiddle, I think Ó Riada perhaps finds something that he wants to find in John Kelly and in some of the other musicians that he meets in Dublin and also in his travels around after that, which were of course again guided by Kelly himself. So from that point of view, he's grappling with two very different ideas: the ensemble sound from so many different traditions and the creativity of the individual or the solo musician. And he's trying to find a place for both. And Tori Coolan, I think, in particular, is an attempt to find that. And it's very different to what he does with Misha Era or the orchestral scores. So it's difficult to assess how successful his attempts at arranging the music and creating new sound were. But certainly when you listen to what else is going on at the same time, it's quite revolutionary. So from that point of view, I think he is successful. I think he's only one step along the road to where it's going, but I think he is successful. But also recognising he's successful, very dependent on the contribution of the wonderful musicians he was working with.
Ó Riada will be remembered as being having left a rich legacy of music and had brought a marked change to our treatment of Irish music that had his personal stamp on it. He had a certain amount of innovation that was welcomed, and he encouraged debate and analysis of our music, which is to be welcomed.
But to assess his legacy is difficult because we must assess the legacy of those that he influenced, and those influences, I think, are quite varied.
Well, some very differing and interesting views on Ó Riada there from people young and old, some who knew him and some who are inspired by him. But Síle, before we get into Ó Riada, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your own background, particularly in relation to the music?
Certainly. I'm from Invern in Connemara, the Connemara Gaeltacht, and I'm a seán singer and a harpist. I'm now lecturing in St Patrick's College in Drumcondra, but I suppose I've spent most of my life either learning music or playing music or teaching music, and I also play in a band called Liadan, and we're on the go for around 10 years now.
Right, what is that, a traditional band?
It's a traditional band of singers and musicians, 6 ladies, yeah.
So a bit of orchestration going on there?
Absolutely, yeah. So we've 2 fiddles, an accordion and harp and flute and whistle. Yeah.
So maybe that provides the opportunity to take your experiences and maybe just give us an overview of Ó Riada. Who was Seán O'Riada?
Well, I suppose Seán O'Riada was one of the most important figures in Irish music. I suppose the 50s and the 60s were a very interesting time in Irish music, and that's when Seán O'Riada came to the fore, a composer, a musician himself, and an Irish speaker, which was very interesting also. And he's had a huge influence on musicians and also on the academic side of Irish music.
Did that Irish language influence in any way his musical development or
I think it did, because the language is so connected with the seán singing. And Seán O'Riada had big interest in seán singing, and he believed that seán, to understand the Irish music, Irish traditional music, you needed to understand the seán singing and how musically and also linguistically. So Seán wasn't brought up with Irish, but he decided that it was so important to him that he moved his family to the Gaeltacht in Coolay, which is where his mother was from later on in life, and he learned the language. And he was also probably one of the most important figures that brought sean singing to the fore for the wider community, brought it outside of the Gaeltacht, brought people like Darach O'Cohan and Seán O'Shea and Seán Zahora from Kerry had a huge influence on him as well.
So the 50s and early 60s was a very interesting time. Ó Riada was at his zenith. What would have happened if he hadn't been around? Where would the music have gone, do you think?
It's a very interesting question, and like you said, it was such an important time for Irish music and for Ireland in general. So Ó Riada was in Dublin at a very important time when Gaelin was coming to the fore. They were promoting Irish music. The film Misha Ada was being made, and Ó Riada's use of Irish music, and that was very important. And then I suppose meeting musicians around Dublin and bringing them together. So sometimes music needs one person for all those things to come together. So it's very difficult to say, would that have happened if Ó Riada hadn't been part of it? I don't think it would have happened in the exact same way, because he had such strong opinions about music and particularly about group playing in Irish music. And I think he wanted to bring this sort of a higher art form to Irish music, because he believed it was a higher form of music, that it wasn't just folk music. So all of these things happened at this time, and I think it would have been very different if Ó Riada hadn't been part of it.
It'd be good to speculate if we had the time where exactly it would have gone.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we're running out of time, so we're going to take a little break in the chat, and we're going to go back over to the Cobblestones and join a group of wonderful young musicians, the Mulligan family.
Myself, Sive, Cueva and Maeve are going to play two hornpipes, Con McCarthy's and the Home Ruler. 3, 4.
Well, that was, I think, a bit of the pure drop from the Mulligan girls. They're absolutely beautiful music in the Cobblestones. So, Síle, back with Seán O'Riada, you'd mentioned a couple of things earlier. I would like to develop them. One is the impact that he made in group playing. How did that happen, and what sort of influence did he have on ensemble or group playing?
Well, I think the way we imagine group playing now, we think of groups like Alton and the Bothy Band, Scarabray before that. None of that would have happened in that way, I don't think, if it wasn't for Seán O'Riada and Ceoltóirí Cúlan. His instrumentation was very important. The way he played the tunes, the way he would have had different rounds of the tunes being played. It was the first time really that Irish music was brought together as an ensemble, other than the Céilí Band that he was very critical of. So the antithesis of the Céilí Band, really, that's what Ceoltóirí Cúlan was for him. And the instrumentation is interesting in a way because, particularly with the harpsichord, he had this idea of the harp, of the sound of the old harp as it was back in the 16th, 17th, 18th centuries, and he wanted to recreate that sound and have that as a crucial part of the group playing, but the harps weren't developed enough at the time, so it would be very interesting if he was alive now, what he would make of how the harp has developed as an instrument.
Indeed, and how groups have developed, even beyond Scarabray or Bothy Band.
Absolutely, and another part of the group playing is the way that he brought sean singers into the group playing. That is one of the most important, for me personally, that's one of the most important things that Ó Riada did. He brought people like Dara O'Cohan onto the Gaiety stage. That would never have happened. Someone like Dara O'Cohan would never have been heard. And Seán O'Shea, and he was very interested in Seán Zahor as well. And that idea still is in a lot of the traditional bands, having an Irish song as part of the group and an arranged version of an Irish song. So I'm not sure that would have happened if Seán O'Riada hadn't had such strong opinions about sean singing being an integral part of the music.
Has there been a downside to that? Did that influence the direction which Seán singing developed? Did it become, or did it express a need to be more commercial as a result of exposure through O'Riada's ensemble context?
I don't think so, because he did both. Because he put Dara O'Cohan on stage and to sing unaccompanied sean singing as if he was in a pub or at home, and he also did versions with Seán O'Shea, arranged versions. So I don't think it's had a negative impact at all on sean singing, because sean singing still had the Oireachtas and still had all of these competitions and still had the Gaeltachts side of things, where the tradition was functioning in its natural setting. So I think it was an interesting thing to bring it out of that setting and bring it onto a wider stage.
Okay. Well, Síle, unfortunately time's running out, so I'd like to ask you for a final assessment overview of O'Riada. Can I just say that in the making of this particular episode, I was struck by the amount of people who wanted to come on and say something positive about O'Riada. And some of those people off camera were prepared to be more critical. And there's lots of people, well-known musicians, who wouldn't come on because they would want to be more balanced and more critical. And I wonder, why is that? Why do you think people revere him and at the same time are reticent about being critical of him?
Yeah, I think it's difficult to be critical about somebody who's had such an impact on the music, and such a positive impact. I suppose with my other hat on, not my musician hat, my lecturer hat, as an academic, looking at some of the things, particularly our musical heritage, which was published as a book after the radio series, he was quite dogmatic in his approach to Irish music, and very black and white. Like the accordion was a shocking instrument for him, and for me the accordion is the essence of Irish music in a lot of ways. So he did have an impact on the academic side as well. People might have followed him too much without challenging some of these ideas that were very black and white. But I think people are looking back now, and it's easier in hindsight maybe to have a more balanced approach to what he had to say.
Well, Síle, thanks very much. We really enjoyed our very brief chat and look back at O'Riada. I think it's important to have done it, as we said, celebrating the 50th anniversary of our musical heritage. Thanks very much, and continued success with the group.
Thanks very much.
All the best.
Thank you.
Well, that was Síle, and helping us try and understand and appreciate the great legacy of Seán O'Riada. That's the end of this episode. The next episode next week, we'll look at the issue of Irish traditional music, whose music, looking at the issue of identity and traditional music, particularly in the context of the Protestant and Catholic communities that share this island. My guest then will be Danny Diamond, and we're looking forward to his informed views on that. In the meantime, take care and many thanks. Slán.